On? Okay, welcome back everybody. We're going to do the third chapter of volume 7 of Teachings for Victory tonight, which is the letter to Horen. Now, I already read this Gosho in its entirety, I don't know, 2-3 months ago. Well, yeah, it was a long time. It was back in February? Okay, so I am going to read out the entire front end of the gray boxes as like a refresher for what the content is. Okay, so we're going to start on page 33. Everybody's with me? Yep. Letter to Horen. This is President Keita's lecture. Walking the great path of mentor and disciple based on the mystic law. So it starts from the Gosho. In the deck, by the way, this is in volume 1, page 505 is where this Gosho starts. So we're going to start reading on excerpts from 512 through 519. Okay. In the declaration concerning the sutra reading that you, the Honorable Horen, have sent me, you state, to mark the 13th year of the departure of my late beloved father, I have performed a 5-time recitation of the One Vehicle Sutra, the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law. The Lotus Sutra offers a secret means for leading all living beings to Buddhahood. It leads one person in the realm of Helm, one person in the realm of hungry spirits, and thus one person in each of the 9 realms of existence to Buddhahood, and thereby the way is opened for all living beings to attain Buddhahood. The situation is like the joints in a piece of bamboo. If one joint is ruptured, then all the joints will split. As to the blessings derived by you, who as chief mourner for your deceased father, have recited the verse section of the lifespan chapter every morning for the period of 13 years, they can only be understood and shared between Buddhas. Your action, your activity to devote yourself to your father in that way, the profundity of that can only be understood between Buddha and shared between Buddhas. The Lotus Sutra represents the bone and marrow of all the sacred teachings of the Buddha's lifetime. And the verse section of the lifespan chapter represents the soul of the 28 chapters of the sutra. The various Buddhas of the 3 existences look upon the lifespan chapter as their very life, and the Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions likewise regard the chapter's verse section as their I. But it is not for me to describe the blessings deriving from the verse section of the lifespan chapter. Rather, I refer to the subsequent distinctions in benefits chapter, which elaborates on them. It says that those people who become Buddhas after hearing the above verse section are equal in number to the particles of dust in a minor world system or a major world system. The Buddhas throughout the 10 directions looked up to the verse section of the lifespan chapter as their teacher and attained Buddhahood. This verse section is like a father and a mother to the people of the world. A person who embraces the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra is sustaining the life of the Buddhas. Would any Buddha then abandon a person who embraces the very sutra through which that Buddha attained enlightenment? If any Buddha should abandon such a person, it would be as though he were abandoning himself. Continuing on page 35. All the characters in which the Lotus Sutra is written represent living Buddhas. But because we have the eyes of common mortals, we see them as characters. It is like the example of the Ganges River. Hungry spirits see the water in the river as fire. Human beings see them as water, and heavenly beings see them as amrita. The waters are the same in all cases, but each type of being sees them differently according to the effects of its karma. Suppose there is an evil ruler who is bent upon destroying the teachings of the Lotus Sutra. In such a case, even at the cost of one's life, one must not obey him. And if there should be eminent priests who keep precepts and practice religious austerities and who appear to be spreading the teachings of the Lotus Sutra but are in fact subverting them, you should perceive the truth of the matter and reprimand them. The Lotus Sutra says, we care nothing for our bodies or lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way. And the Nirvana Sutra states, it is like a royal envoy who would rather, even though it costs him his life, in the end conceal none of the words of his ruler. The great teacher Chang'an commented on this. A royal envoy would rather, even though it costs him his life, in the end conceal none of the words of the ruler means that one's body is insignificant while the law is supreme. One should give one's life in order to propagate the law. Judging from outward appearances, at present I, Nichiren, am the most perverse man in all of Japan. Among 100, 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 people of the 4 categories of believers in the 66 provinces in the 2 outlying islands of our country, I am detested by the entire populace of both high and low station. In the 700 or more years since the teachings of the Buddha were first introduced to Japan, there has never been anyone who was hated to such a degree because of the Lotus Sutra. Because of your kindness, I wonder, have my departed father and mother perhaps taken possession of you? Or is this some blessing brought about by the world-honored one of great enlightenment? I cannot hold back my tears. Goes on to the lecture. And of course, as always, I mean, almost every one of these lectures, President Kato always calls on his mentor's perception and inspiration. So he's going to once again start talking about President Toda as the basis of how he views all of this. Lecture. Proceeded once on, this is the first column, middle of the page 36. Proceed at once on the right path. It is not enough to take steps which may someday lead to a goal. Each step must itself be a goal. These are the words of the German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. They are from a book that I studied together with a group of close friends when I was 19 in the summer of 1947, just 2 years after the war. All too many Japanese political and intellectual leaders had suddenly reversed their positions, going from extolling the war effort one day to being ardent advocates of peace the next. We young people struggled with conflicting emotions, feeling angry and betrayed, no longer able to believe in anything, yet also wishing to find a path in which we could place our trust. I found the path I should walk when I encountered my mentor in life, Second Soka Gakkai President Josei Toda. I first met Mr. Toda on the hot and humid evening of August 14, 1947 at a Soka Gakkai discussion meeting held in Tokyo's Oto Ward, the neighborhood still then scarred by wartime destruction. I asked him, "What is the correct way to live?" He looked me in the eye and replied to my question with great seriousness. I immediately sensed in his sincere response to an ordinary young person like me that this Buddhism was something very different from other religions. This Buddhism was something very different from other religions I knew, and I instinctively felt he was someone I could believe. That intuition changed into conviction when I learned that Mr. Toda was a champion of peace who had spent 2 years in prison during the war for his opposition to the Japanese militarist authorities. Middle of page 137, first column. The bonds of mentor and disciple united in the bonds of mentor and disciple united in Kosen-rufu are eternal. Striving alongside Mr. Toda, I have advanced straight ahead on the path of Kosen-rufu. It is the path of human revolution, the path of victory in life. It is the path for realizing happiness for all people, for transforming the karma of humankind, and for creating a future of world peace. It is also the great path of the oneness of mentor and disciple throughout the 3 existences of past, present, and future. In this chapter, I will discuss the spirit and practice of mentor and disciple united for Kosen-rufu, as presented in the letter to Horen, which Nichiren Daishonin sent to a faithful disciple named Soya Kyoshin, also known as Horen. Nichiren gave him the name Horen. Soya Kyoshin was a feudal lord of Soya village in Katsushika district of Shimosa province, along with fellow disciples Toki Jonin and Ota Jomyo, who also lived in Shimosa province. Soya Kyoshin remained steadfast in faith even during the great trials of the Tatsunokuchi persecution and Sato exile. In this letter, the Daishonin praises Kyoshin's faith, calling him the Honorable Horen. On the occasion of the 13th memorial anniversary, 12th anniversary of his father's passing, Kyoshin sent offerings to the Daishonin and what is referred to as a declaration concerning sutra readings, a form of a eulogy that was commonly read aloud at a memorial service. This letter, written in 1275, is the Daishonin's response. In it, he lauds Kyoshin's filial devotion and offers guidance on various aspects of faith. As we know, it's a 20-page gosho. It's a very extensive letter. The Daishonin also assures Kyoshin that his father is certain to attain Buddhahood due to the dedicated faith of his son, who is striving alongside the votary of the Lotus Sutra of the latter day of the law, that is, Nichiren Daishonin. As such, this writing is also known as the attainment of enlightenment by father and son. Okay, continue on page 37, second column from the Gosho. The enlightenment of one opens the way to the enlightenment for all. We all understand that, right? Okay, in the declaration concerning sutra readings that you, the Honorable Horen, have sent to me, you state, to mark the 13th year of the departure of my late beloved father, I have performed a 5-time recitation of the One Vehicle Sutra, the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law. The Lotus Sutra offers a secret means for leading all living beings to Buddhahood. It leads one person in the realm of hell, one person in the realm of hungry spirits, and thus one person in each of the 9 realms of existences to Buddhahood, and thereby the way is open for all living beings to attain Buddhahood. So he just described the mutual possession of the 10 worlds right there, right? The situation is like the joints in a piece of bamboo. If one joint is ruptured, then all the joints will split. In his declaration, middle of page 38, first column, in his declaration, there's a bunch of important points coming up. In his declaration concerning sutra readings, Soya Kyoshin states that he has consistently recited the Lotus Sutra for his deceased father. Okay, they're doing the Jigage, actually, not the whole sutra, by the way. All right? The Daishonin was delighted to learn of such sincere filial devotion and commends Kyoshin, telling him that the Lotus Sutra is the sutra of true filial devotion. Okay, do you know what he's saying when he says of true filial devotion? He's saying again, the sutra of that allows you to express your appreciation and debt of gratitude to your parents. If you're talking about filial, we're talking about mom and dad, right? While among all the sutras, why among all the sutras is the Lotus Sutra the sutra of true filial devotion? Because only the Lotus Sutra leads all living beings to enlightenment. In this letter, the Daishonin writes, the Lotus Sutra leads one person in the realm of hell, one person in the realm of hungry spirits, and thus one person in each of the 9 realms of existence to Buddhahood, and thereby the way is open for all living beings to attain Buddhahood. In Nichiren Buddhism, universal enlightenment is not an abstract theory or principle. It is not an abstract theory or principle. What matters is whether the teaching actually helps an individual attain Buddhahood. No matter what circumstances someone in front of us may be placed in or what sufferings they may be going through, their gaining enlightenment serves as proof that the teaching can do the same for all people. Do you understand what he's qualifying there? No matter who your mentor might be, when he says, no matter what circumstances someone in front of us may be placed in, he's really kind of referring to President Toda. Okay, he's understanding that, a simple life of no problems is not what the Lotus Sutra teaches. Okay, so no matter what circumstances, so don't judge the efficacy of the power of the sutra and the power of your faith and practice on whether or not some other person is going through issues of human revolution or through issues of actualizing the power of the Gohonzon and for the sake of others in reality. That's what we all do, right? We deliberately create the appropriate karma, correct? So everything we experience, we did what was necessary to make it be that way, okay? So, no matter what circumstances someone in front of us may be placed in or what sufferings they may be going through, their gaining enlightenment serves as proof that the teachings can do the same for all people. We're here as living examples. That's the whole deal. The Daishonin likens this process to the joints in a piece of bamboo. If one joint is ruptured, then all the joints will split. Likewise, when an individual who has been suffering from illness or financial hardship becomes happy, this opens a sure way to happiness for all others experiencing similar painful sufferings. Continuing page 38, middle of the page, second column. The Lotus Sutra is the supreme sutra of filial devotion. In this letter, the Daishonin further states, among the living beings of the six paths and the four forms of birth, there are both men and women, and these men and women were our parents at some point in our past existences. Okay, I'll say that again because it's an important thing to grasp from the predication of understanding what the concept of this point is about all living beings. In his letter, the Daishonin further states, among the living beings in the sixth paths, of the sixth paths. Now, who are the living beings of the sixth paths? Not really. We've gone into the upper. The six paths are people that haven't met Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, frankly. Okay, they have not encountered the true teaching. All right, there are both men and women. Okay, because what this is about is, does Soya Kyoshin's dad chant? No. Okay, Soya got shakubuku. His dad died. He started chanting for him every day. What this whole Gosho is about is, Soya, your dad will attain Buddhahood because you attain Buddhahood. Okay, that's the teaching. That's the repayment, the filial devotion, is that you lead your parents, regardless of what they say or do, okay, to Buddhahood if you hold steadfast in your faith at the last moment of your life and you attain Buddhahood. That's what he's getting ready to qualify here. In the letter, the Daishonin further states, among the living beings of the sixth paths and the four forms of birth, which is a bunch of weird stuff, there are both men and women, and these men and women were our parents at some point in our past existences. So there's no other living beings that we don't have a relationship with. That's really something that you need to understand, it's saying very clearly. There are zero other living beings that we lack an existing relationship with. Therefore, as long as even one of these, and he's talking about the people of the six paths, right? Okay, so he says, even therefore, as long as if even one of these fails to attain Buddhahood, then we ourselves cannot attain Buddhahood. Because if it isn't for everybody, it's not for anybody. Right. That's the whole point. That's what's cool about it. Because everyone is connected to us from past existences. If even one fails, that's why it doesn't make any sense to be a racist. Seriously. Okay? Because everyone is connected to us from past existences. If even one fails to attain Buddhahood, then so do we. This is the spirit in which Shakyamuni spread his teachings. It is what makes him the most outstanding among all the persons noted for their filial devotion. He's quoting the Gosho there. Continuing on page 39, first column. Showing true filial devotion is indeed the first step toward all people attaining enlightenment. So I have friends that I know are listening to this video that have issues with their parents. It's not how tight you are with your parent. It's how compassionate you are. The genuine compassion of desiring their attainment of Buddhahood. That's what'll get through no matter what kind of person they are. As long as you are the Buddha, you will strike the chord of Buddhahood that exists in their 10 worlds. Because they got 10 worlds in them no matter whether they were criminals or they were great moms and dads, okay? Showing true filial devotion is indeed the first step toward all people attaining enlightenment. All people. Faith for a harmonious family is one of the eternal guidelines of the Soka Gakkai. Naturally, some members may be the only ones in their families practicing Nichiren Buddhism. I am well aware of how difficult that can be. In my youth, wishing for the happiness of my family, but that's the whole point. As long as we practice, 6 generations in both directions gain immeasurable good fortune, right? Mm-hmm. Generations, that's talking about all of the people we're connected to as it relates to any kind of a family tree in this existence, right? Mm-hmm. In my youth, wishing for the happiness of my family, I chanted earnestly for my father to follow my mother's lead and become a Soka Gakkai member as well. Sensing my ardent wish to have my father practice, Mr. Toda said to me at that time, the important thing is that you stand up with strong faith. A big, magnificent umbrella can shelter many people all at once. Yes. In the same way, if one family member starts striving in faith, that person can protect the entire family. The benefit and good fortune you obtain through the wholehearted efforts you are making in your Buddhist practice will also be transmitted to your father. In his heart, he is already a Soka Gakkai member. I'm sure he's quietly supporting you and also very proud of you. I had the same thing happen with my dad, because I'm from a very Christian family, and I was a very delinquent youth. And so, when my father saw Buddhism and my practice transform who I was at the core of who I was, my dad said, there's something here. To even everybody, all the other Christians in the family, it's in our family history my uncle compiled. It's pretty profound because everybody in my family then knows about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, not because of me, but because of my father telling them what an impact Nam-myoho Renge-kyo had on me. Okay? I wasn't really a part of the group to be able to leave a little, comments. So, indeed, bottom of page 39, first column, indeed, my father always took a warm interest in the efforts I was making for Kosen Rufu alongside Mr. Toda. When one person stands up with strong faith, everyone in the family, even those who have not yet started practicing, is enveloped in the light of the mystic law. In his letter to Soya Kyoshin, the Daishonin declares, the blessings that you yourself are in fact treasures belonging to your the blessings that you yourself enjoy are in fact treasures belonging to your late father. When you, as an individual, exert yourself in faith, you can also lead others in your environment toward the path to attaining Buddhahood. The lives of your family members, relatives, friends, and loved ones too, even if they are suffering in such lower states as hell or hunger, will move in the direction of hope and happiness. Such is the tremendous power of the mystic law, and we should all have faith in that being a fact. Also, when you personally stand up and dedicate yourself to your mission for Kosen Rufu in your local area, it will have a powerful ripple effect. The human revolution of a single individual opens the way to a breakthrough for the happiness and victory for all people and victory for all, of all. Page 39, Wulong and Ilong, father and is it Ilong or
Ilong?
Ilong, okay. Wulong and Ilong, father and son attaining Buddhahood together. As to the blessings derived by you, who as the chief mourner, this is from the Gosho again, for your deceased father have recited the verse section of the lifespan chapter every morning for a period of 13 years, they can only be understood and shared between Buddhists. The Lotus Sutra represents the bone and marrow of all the sacred teachings of the Buddha's lifetime. And the verse section of the lifespan chapter represents the soul of the 28 chapters of the sutra. The various Buddhas of the three existences look upon the lifespan chapter as their very life, and the Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions likewise regard the chapter's verse section as their I. But it is not for me to describe the blessings derived from the verse section of the lifespan chapter. Rather, I refer to the subsequent distinctions and benefits chapter, which elaborates on them. It says that those people who became Buddhas after hearing the above verse section are equal in number to the particles of dust in a minor world system or a major world system. Okay. All right, going on continuing, page 40, first column. In Soya Kyoshin's declaration, he writes, from the morning when my compassionate father closed his eyes to the 13th anniversary of his passing, I have recited the verse section of the lifespan chapter before Shakyamuni, thus come one, and have transferred the merits to my departed father. Referring to the Chinese story of Wulong and Ilong, the Daishonin indicates to Kyoshin that this daily recitation assures his father's attainment of Buddhahood. Pardon me. This story can be summarized briefly as follows. A calligrapher named Wulong died, warning his son Ilong never to transcribe any of the Buddhist sutras, in particular the Lotus Sutra. Ilong observed his father's dying wish, but the ruler ordered him to transcribe the Lotus Sutra. Ilong repeatedly refused, but in the end he had to obey the ruler's command. Tearfully, he inscribed just the sutra's volume titles, writing Horen Geikyo, Volume 1, and so on, for each volume down to Volume 8. Regarding having disobeyed his father, Ilong had a dream in which his father appeared and spoke to him. He recounted how he had been undergoing excruciating agonies in the hell of incessant suffering for having slandered the Lotus Sutra. But then, one day, he said, 64 characters of the titles of the volumes of the Lotus Sutra written by Ilong came flying down to that hell, where they changed into 64 golden-hued Buddhas, glowing as brightly as myriad suns and moons, and saved him from, again, this is all from Nat Gosho. Continuing on page 40, second column. By extension, this indicates that through chanting the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, we can transmit benefit even to deceased family members, relatives, friends, or acquaintances who may have opposed our Buddhist practice. I'll say that again. By extension, this indicates that though through chanting the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, we can transmit benefit even to deceased family members, relatives, friends, or acquaintances who may have opposed our Buddhist practice. Benefit that will warmly embrace them and lead them to a state of profound peace and comfort. Similarly, through the power of, because they've all heard the name and the words of the truth if they gave you a hard time about being a Buddhist. Yeah. If you did your job, you at least introduced them to the words Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Lead them to a state of profound peace and comfort. Similarly, through the power of the mystic law, our family members and friends who have died in the course of the journey for Kosen Rufu, whether from illness or as a result of unexpected accidents or natural disasters, will also be able to enter the path of Buddhahood. The best offering we can make for the eternal happiness of the departed is to live fully and to strive vibrantly for Kosen Rufu in their stead, knowing that our fortune radiates out to them. We're not just practicing for ourselves when we practice, even if we are practicing for ourselves. The benefit extends extensively within our family tree. Perhaps Soya Kyoshin was worried about the fate of his father, who died without having faith in the Lotus Sutra. As if sensing this, the Daishonin goes on to encourage him further, describing in a most vivid and detailed manner how his late father was surely being guided to enlightenment. The Daishonin says that each of the 510 characters of the verse section of the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra form from Jiga Tokuburai, since I attained Buddhahood, to Sokujoju Bushin, quickly acquire the body of a Buddha, changes into a sun, then into a Shakyamuni Buddha. It emits great beams of light that pervade every corner of the universe, finding Kyoshin's father, wherever he might be, and illuminating him. In other words, each character recited by Kyoshin becomes the Buddha, shining with the brilliant light of compassion, because it's part of the Lotus Sutra, right? Mm-hmm. Each character becomes the Buddha, shining with the brilliant light of compassion that reaches his deceased father in whatever state of being he may reside, relieving him of his suffering and guiding him to enlightenment. The top of page 41, second column. The soul of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. And again, when we use the word soul, that's a translative, interpretive word for the essence of being. Okay? It's not like a soul, like a continuous entity, like in Western religion. The soul, or the essence of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. The benefit derived from upholding the Lotus Sutra is truly immense. The Lotus Sutra is the supreme teaching that enables anyone to attain enlightenment. In particular, the Daishonin says that reciting the verse section of the lifespan chapter produces immeasurable benefit that can only be understood and shared between Buddhas. Our recitation of the sutra morning and evening, Gongyo, envelops the lives of both the living and the dead in good fortune and benefit without fail, just as the bright light of the sun illuminates and warmly embraces all things. I'll say it again. Our recitation of the sutra during morning and evening Gongyo envelops the lives of both the living and the dead in good fortune and benefit without fail, just as the bright light of the sun illuminates and warmly embraces all things. The lifespan chapter states that the light of the Buddha's wisdom shines without measure, and that the Buddha's lifespan is countless kalpas long. The light of the Buddha's wisdom pervades everything and shines for all eternity. There is absolutely no need to lament or be filled with fear. Viewed from the perspective of Buddhism and from the perspective of life's eternal nature, we are always advancing together with our departed friends and loved ones, united by our powerful connection to the mystic law. The characters of the Lotus Sutra, inscribed by Elung, become Buddhas and relieved his late father of suffering. Likewise, our strong, focused chanting of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo can reach anywhere, exerting a positive influence not only on those still living, but on those who have died. Though we may be separated from our deceased loved ones and fellow members, we can always stay connected with them in our hearts and relieve them of any suffering. The Daishonin praises Soya Kyoshin as being truly filial and making sincere offerings to his deceased father in the form of reciting the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra each day. His promise that both father and son together would definitely attain Buddhahood no doubt deeply reassured Kyoshin and enabled him to advance with fresh resolve. Continuing on page 42, middle of the page, first column. Inheriting the life of the Buddhas. From the Gosho. The Buddhas throughout the 10 directions looked up to the verse section of the lifespan chapter as their teacher and attained Buddhahood. This verse section is like a father and a mother to the people of the world. So what did he just say there? What is that saying very clearly? We said it, we discussed it the last time we were together. What is the source of all Buddhas attaining Buddhahood? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo precedes Shakyamuni's teachings. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's the teaching of the original state. Okay, it's the teaching of Kuan. Mm-hmm. All right, inheriting the life of the Buddhas. he's not making a qualification here. The Buddhists throughout the 10 directions looked up to the verse section of the Lifespan chapter as their teacher and attained Buddhahood. All of them attained Buddhahood through the verse section of the Lifespan chapter. Okay? This verse section is like a father and a mother to the people of the world. A person who embraces the Lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra is sustaining the life of the Buddhas. Now, what's in the Lifespan chapter? Hidden in the Lifespan chapter. What's significant about the Lifespan chapter?
The truth.
The truth, absolutely. But what is there? What did Nichiren bring forth based on
He is the best come.
Nam-myoho Renge-kyo comes from the Lifespan chapter. When you hear him talk about the Lifespan chapter, he's talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay? The Lifespan chapter is a chapter of the Lotus Sutra. We're in Mappo, folks. Right? So when you hear him talking to Soya Kyoshin in the 13th century, understand the words that he's using in regard to what you understand about his teaching, knowing it much more so than probably Soya Kyoshin. So a person who embraces the Lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra is sustaining the life of the Buddhas. You could say a person who embraces Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is sustaining the life of the Buddhas. That's why we can inherit it by chanting.
Right.
Okay? Would any Buddha then abandon a person who embraces the very sutra which that Buddha attained enlightenment? If any Buddha should abandon such a person, it would be as though he were abandoning himself. Top of page 42, second column. All the characters in which the Lotus Sutra is written represent living Buddhas. But because we have the eyes of common mortals, we see them as characters. It is like the example of the Ganges River. Hungry spirits see the waters of the river as fire. Human beings see them as water. And heavenly beings see them as amrita, or sweet dew. The waters are the same in all cases, but each type of being sees them differently. Each life condition, there's 10 worlds, right? Sees them differently according to the effects of its karma, because that's what's reflecting. The world that you're in is a reflection of your causes. That's your karma. The Daishonin states that the verse section, this is going back to President Keita's lecture, the Daishonin states that the verse section of the Lifespan chapter is the teacher that enabled all Buddhas to attain enlightenment, and also the mother and father of all living beings. He says, a person who embraces the Lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra is sustaining the life of the Buddhas. The phrase sustaining the life of the Buddhas here can also be interpreted as inheriting the life of the Buddhas. Inheriting the life of the Buddhas. Is there a difference in the Buddhahood between one Buddha and another? No. It's a matter of being able to perceive the truth in all circumstances. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, he goes on then. The seed or cause of Buddhahood, all right, lies hidden in the text of the Lifespan chapter. As such, the life of each person who embraces this chapter is endowed with the same power and potential that all Buddhas possess. And since all Buddhas have attained enlightenment through the Lifespan chapter, they will unfailingly protect those who uphold this chapter, the Daishonin declares. This is your promise from Nichiren. How reassuring it is to me. The Daishonin also writes, all the characters in which the Lotus Sutra is written represent living Buddhas. Pardon me. All the characters in the Lotus Sutra, in which the Lotus Sutra is written, represent living Buddhas. Okay? Now, what's he also qualifying there? Shakyamuni's not the only Buddha. That's what he's saying. That all the characters in which the Lotus Sutra is written represent living Buddhas. There's not just one Buddha Shakyamuni that left the Lotus Sutra for us to read. Do you understand? But because we have the eyes of common mortals, we just see the characters. We don't see the depth of what the characters really are. Okay? what gives those words, the characters are words, right?
Right.
What gives those words power? That's what we don't see. We perceive them as words. They're in fact much, much deeper in reality in regard to their essence. Their essence. When we do Gongyo and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to the Gohonzon, top of page 43, first column, which consists of written characters, we come into contact with the immense life of Nichiren Daishonin, the Buddha of the latter day of the law. Nothing infuses our lives with greater joy. This is all the more reason for us to sit in front of the Gohonzon and chant Daimoku, both when we're happy and when we're facing painful struggles. Then, just as the Daishonin says, we will savor a life state imbued with the four noble virtues of eternity, happiness, true self, and purity, and enter the path of Buddhahood. Pardon me. Okay? I need to make a comment about this, but he always talks about President Toda. You know, because in his practice, in his years of faith, what President Toda expressed to him personally, okay, is his treasure that it really can't be replicated. Okay, for me personally, this reality was the first thing that Mr. Matsuoka taught me. Okay, and I just received my Gohonzon. So I had that same sense about mentor-disciple. I was always talking to Nichiren Daishonin whenever I chanted. Whenever I chanted, I was having a personal relationship with the original teacher. I still have that perception. That's still how when I'm in front of the Gohonzon, I'm not looking at a piece of paper. I'm communicating with my master from the eternal, infinite past. Okay, I'm the one that I promised I made the vow to. That's it. Okay. I'll say it again and I'll keep going. When we do Gongyo and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to the Gohonzon, which consists of written characters, we come into contact. Now he's telling you that this is what Mr. Matsuoka told me, is that basically what President Kate is reconfirming here. So if you look at it as a piece of paper, you don't understand what it is. Because it's not that Gohonzon, it's the one in you that's being activated. That's the only reason you can embrace the one that you see in the altar. All right? You are a bodhisattva of the earth. The piece of paper isn't a bodhisattva of the earth.
Right.
Do you understand? Characters represent Buddhas. Do you understand? Okay. When we do Gongyo and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to the Gohonzon, which consists of written characters, we come into contact with the immense life of Nichiren Daishonin, the Buddha of the latter day of the law. Nothing infuses our lives with greater joy. That's been my experience. This is all the more reason for us to sit in front of the Gohonzon and chant Daimoku, both when we are happy and when facing painful struggles. Then, just as the Daishonin says, we will savor a life state imbued with four noble truths of eternity, happiness, true self, and purity, the life state of Buddha, and enter the eternal path of Buddhahood. Continuing, page 43, middle of the first column, from the Gosho, the pride of struggling alongside the votary of the Lotus Sutra. And what we qualified last time about what is a votary. Who is a votary? All of us that are devoted to our faith in the Gohonzon and our mission for Kosen Rufu. There are a lot of people that chant for benefits. Right. They don't chant because they perceive their true identity and their debt of gratitude. Okay? So, there's a distinction. Yes. Until you cross that line, it's theoretical. You cannot access actual Ichinen Sanzen, frankly. All right? Continuing on page 43 from the Gosho. Suppose there is an evil ruler who is bent upon destroying the teachings of the Lotus Sutra. In such a case, even at the cost of one's life, one must not obey him. And if there should be eminent priests who keep the precepts and practice religious austerities, and who appear to be, because they seem to be so pious, those are the men in the white robes, spreading the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, but are in fact subverting them, You should perceive the truth of the matter and reprimand them. You should remonstrate with them. You should not allow somebody to slander the Lotus Sutra and not say, whoa, dude, don't do that. Come on.
Right.
All right? The Lotus Sutra says we care nothing for our bodies or lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way. So if that individual might seem threatening to you, you still should speak up. I'm not saying put yourself in a position of, maybe you want to be like Bodhisattva, never disparaging. Run, before you start saying what you got to say. It doesn't matter. The point is that never disparaging could never leave those people without saying, you're doing the wrong thing. That's why they despised him. He wouldn't shut up saying, you're doing the wrong thing. You're misunderstanding the correct thing. Okay, so the Lotus Sutra says we care nothing for our bodies or lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way. And the Nirvana Sutra states it is like a royal envoy who would rather, even though it cost him his life, in the end, conceal none of the words of his ruler for which he had been sent to convey. The great teacher Chang'an commented on this, saying, a royal envoy would rather, even though it costs him his life, in the end conceal none of the words of the ruler. Means that one's body is insignificant while the law is supreme. One should give one's life in order to propagate the law. Now for us, this is a very significant statement and teaching here, because there's a potentiality that we may be governed by other people at some point in time that have rules against organized religion. Okay? Are you going to stand up? I'll have no choice. But at some point in time, we may find ourselves having to put our own very lives at risk in order to do what the teaching says we must do. We don't have to all do it, but what somebody does. Somebody got to show that this teaching is correct. Okay? So remember that responsibility when or if it ever comes around. This isn't happy talk. We care nothing for our bodies or lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way. We're given direct input. Do not allow slander to go unopposed. Okay? So understand that's part of what you're supposed to do. In Letter to Horen, middle of page 43, in addition to praising Soya Kyoshin's filial devotion and stressing the power of the mystic law and transferring benefit to the deceased, the Daishonin also describes his great conviction and struggles as the votary of the Lotus Sutra and the latter day of the law. It's difficult. What is the great offering we can make for the happiness of the deceased in this age of the latter day? What is the best cause we can make to transfer benefit to them? The Daishonin answers that it is to struggle alongside the true votary of the Lotus Sutra to spread the mystic law. That's one of the reasons why I'm reading you this from Daisaku Ikeda. He is a true votary of the mystic law. That's my assessment. Okay, not any declaration he makes. But why I read you this. This is the truth. What is the greatest offering we can make for the happiness of the deceased in this age and the latter day? What is the best cause we can make to transfer benefit to them? The Daishonin answers that it is to struggle alongside the true votary of the Lotus Sutra to spread the mystic law. This is the supreme good cause we can make. I've got 3 stars there. Why? That's supporting the Soka Gakkai. That's supporting the Buddhism of the sun. That's making the distinction between other schools and what we do, and not letting them slander people that we know as mentors and saying nothing about it. If somebody says something bad about Daisaku Ikeda, I'm going to be in their face. And I'm not an official Soka Gakkai member, but I understand this truth, and this is how I must live my life. Okay? To highlight this point, he goes on to vividly describe his momentous struggles as the votary of the Lotus Sutra. For us too, the united struggle of the mentor and disciple to spread the mystic law represents the truest and most correct path of life. It serves as the ultimate path of filial devotion, and it is also the best possible offering we can make for the happiness of the deceased, eternally illuminating the way ahead throughout the three existences of past, present, and future. Why? Because we've opened the name, they've heard the name and the words of the truth. We've opened the way. There's no going back. Past, present, and future is all in that single moment of life.
Yeah.
If in that single moment of life, everything changes, forward and backwards. Karma changes. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right. So, what kind of struggle does the votary of the Lotus Sutra undertake in the latter day of the law? An evil age mired in the five impurities? It is to spread the teaching in accord with the time, asserts the Daishonin. A person of wisdom is one who understands the time, spreads the teaching of the Lotus Sutra accordingly. Pardon me. Let me say it again. Yeah, pardon me. Excuse me. It is, pardon me, let me go to the top. First full paragraph, page 44, first column. We're almost finished. What kind of struggle does the votary of the Lotus Sutra undertake in the latter day of the law, an evil age mired in the five impurities? It is to spread the teaching in accord with the time, asserts the Daishonin. A person of wisdom is one who understands the time, spreads the teachings of the Lotus Sutra accordingly. This is the most important task. He then briefly summarizes the struggle to be waged by the votary at this time in the latter day. Because again, this time is any moment of life. This time is we're in the latter day. For instance, when an evil ruler is intent on destroying the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, one must not obey him. And you probably won't be treated nicely if you disobey the ruler. But the teaching is one must not obey him,
Right.
even at the cost of one's life. Okay, I'm just letting you know that's what the deal is. When priests who seem to uphold the precepts and be diligent in Buddhist practice give the appearance of spreading the Lotus Sutra but are actually undermining it, one should reprimand them, which is what President Toda did after World War II. Okay, which is what started this whole situation that we're in now. In other words, he says that one must not follow those who are enemies of the Lotus Sutra. This perfectly describes the Daishonin's own struggle. In the latter day of the law, he explains, it is important to protect and propagate the correct teaching of Buddhism with selfless devotion and the spirit of valuing the law more highly than one's own life. That's do not begrudge your life. That means if it comes down to it, I'm willing to die for it. It's pretty serious stuff. Second column, page 44. The votary of the Lotus Sutra is the protagonist of the latter day. In the first, and by the way, that's never a sacrifice. You know that, right? Okay. That's being a badass. The ultimate badass. In the first half of this letter, the Daishonin describes in detail the benefit one gains through making offerings to the votary of the Lotus Sutra, and the negative consequences certain to be incurred by those who slander him, the votary of the Lotus Sutra. He opens the letter by writing, the teacher of the law chapter in the 4th volume of the Lotus Sutra states, if there should be an evil person who, his mind destitute of goodness, should for the space of a kalpa appear in the presence of the Buddha and constantly curse and revile the Buddha, that person's offense would still be rather light. But if there were a person who spoke only one evil word to curse or defame the lay persons or monks or nuns who read and recite the Lotus Sutra, then his offense would be very grave. This passage tells us that slandering the votary of the Lotus Sutra, even minutely, is a far greater offense than slandering the Buddha over a long period of time. The Daishonin also states, the blessings to be obtained from praising and making offerings to the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter age, even with no particular sincerity, it is stated, are 100,000, 10,000, million times greater than those to be obtained by conducting oneself with a believing heart, believing heart in the three categories of body, mouth, and mind, which means you're doing and you're saying and you're thinking all the same things, and offering alms to the living body of the Buddha for an entire kalpa. Okay? Compared to the benefit, continuing, President Ikeda says, this is his lecture. Compared to the benefit of making sincere offerings to the Buddha for an immeasurably long time through our actions, words, and thoughts, the benefits of making even the most casual offerings to the votary of the Lotus Sutra, the latter day of the law, is incalculably greater. And by the way, a votary would never begrudge their life. So if you begrudge your life, you probably aren't. The people of the latter day, having allowed the poison of slander to deeply penetrate their lives, have lost the desire to seek the correct teaching of Buddhism, have lost the desire to seek the correct teaching of Buddhism. They can be awakened to the correct teaching only by the votary of the Lotus Sutra, thereby revitalizing their lives. Now, when again he says only by the votary of the Lotus Sutra, that's a connection with the Gohonzon and chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thereby revitalizing their lives. That's how you do it in the latter day of the law. You don't do it any other way. But this requires that the votary wage an all-out struggle at the very risk of his life. Because if he's going to be a votary, he's going to have to risk, his life is going to be risked. Those adversities are going to occur. Those devils are going to definitely try and dissuade somebody that's really the Buddha, that's teaching other peoples, that is being the living example of how to actually create actual Ichinen Sanzen in their life. It's going to be difficult. It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be as simple as I know a bunch of stuff and I can just read it to you. It's going to be based on experiences of faith. The existence of the votary of the Lotus Sutra makes it possible for everyone to carry out correct faith and practice because they're the living example of doing it. It is, again, how could we talk about do not begrudge your life without all this starting with President Makaguchi and President Toda? That's it. That pretty much initiates the correct spirit of everything that is to follow. All right? It is, they went to prison rather than give in to what was being told to them to accept.
Right.
They remonstrated until they said, if you don't stop remonstrating, I'm going to put you in jail. Do your worst. It is important to follow the correct teacher of Kosen Rufu. He's really talking about himself here. Deepen one's faith, strengthen one's Buddhist practice so that you can become a correct teacher, and participate in the great endeavor to widely propagate the mystic law. Such noble efforts endow one's life with immeasurable benefit. And we can all do that in our own special way. We all have separate missions. We all don't have to be Daisaku Ikeda to be votaries. Okay? The joy of the shared struggle of mentor and disciple, second column, page 45. Judging from outward appearances, at present, I, Nichiren, am the most perverse man in all of Japan. Among 100, 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 people of the four categories of believers, that is, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, in the 66 provinces and the 2 outlying islands of our country, I am detested by the entire population, both high and low station. In the 700 or more years since the teachings of the Buddha were first introduced to Japan, there has never been anyone who was hated to such a degree because of the Lotus Sutra, not even Dengyo. Because of your kindness in visiting me at Minobu, I wonder, have my departed father and mother perhaps taken possession of you? Or is this some blessing brought about by the world-honored one of great enlightenment? I cannot hold back my tears. Bottom of page 45. Second column. The Daishonin goes so far as to say that he is regarded as the most perverse man in all of Japan and the most perverse man in the entire land of Jampatvipa, which is the entire world. He wishes to underscore in this way that he alone is propagating the mystic law and encountering persecution in the process as the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day. Expressing his profound gratitude to Soya Kyoshin, who has supported and stood by him when all others view him as an evil renegade, he says, I cannot hold back my tears. As disciples, there is no greater joy than having the rare fortune to encounter Buddhism and be able to strive alongside an extraordinary mentor for Kosen Rufu, my good friends. Here, the Daishonin says that he too is overjoyed to the point of tears to struggle together with such a loyal disciple. To steadfastly follow the Daishonin, who was hated by people throughout the land and persecuted by the ruling authorities, meant coming under attack as well. Even so, as a true disciple, Soya Kyoshin chose to fight alongside him, come what may. He walked the path of mentor and disciple, dedicated to propagating the mystic law in a corrupt and troubled age. The Daishonin unstintingly praised Kyoshin, who pledged to join him in his dauntless struggle amid unending criticism and abuse from arrogant persons far and wide. To highlight the significance of their shared struggle, the Daishonin explains that the great battle he has been waging thus far is to transform the karma of the entire Japanese nation. The Daishonin says, it would seem that when one is able to show clearly visible proof in the present, expounds the Lotus Sutra, there will be persons who will believe. The mystic law is difficult to believe and difficult to understand. Therefore, by employing clearly visible proof, the proof of actual fact, of its validity, he endeavored to open the eyes of the ordinary people whose lives were shrouded in fundamental ignorance, help them rouse faith, and enable them to become happy. In this letter, the Daishonin declares that his two predictions of revolt within and invasion from abroad have been fulfilled. This should be regarded as a call to people to open their eyes to Nichiren. This is just like his opening of the eyes lecture. Open your eyes to Nichiren, the Buddha of the latter day of the law, and to follow his example. One mind. The actions are the same. The intent is the same. The devotion is the same. The vow is the same. Okay? When I say actions, it's the spirit, I should say. We all are going to do different things, but the spirit in which we do it is going to be the same. We can surmise this for the sake of Kosen Rufu, right? We can surmise, therefore, that his true intent in citing his struggles as proof that he is the voter, we can surmise, therefore, that his true intent in citing his struggles as proof that he is the voter of Lotus Sutra is to encourage his disciples to strive alongside him as a votary of the Lotus Sutra. The emergence of the Soka Gakkai is also clearly visible proof. Page 46, second column, middle. The Soka Gakkai has directly inherited the spirit of Nichiren Daishonin and has thus been striving to realize world peace and happiness for all humankind. Because of this great lofty mission, it too has been showered with uninformed, groundless criticism for many years. Mr. Toda declared real religion, true Buddhism, helps the poor and the sick. The Soka Gakkai is the ally of the ordinary people. It is the friend of those who are suffering. No matter how we are disparaged or scorned, we will keep fighting for those people. In the eyes of the Buddha, that is a truly noble thing to do. He also said, we of the Soka Gakkai chose to be born poor or sick so that we can help lead others to practice Nichiren Buddhism. That being the case, when we make wholehearted efforts to share Buddhism with others, we will return to a state of absolute happiness. Since being poor and sick is something we have chosen, we have no reason to complain. Deliberately creating the appropriate karma. So everything that we're experiencing is part of our vow. We're doing this again. It's not the first time. It's not the last time. The Soka Gakkai, continuing page 47, and we are at the last page. The Soka Gakkai, which was often ridiculed in the early days as a gathering of the poor and sick, has always walked proudly alongside ordinary people, refusing to be defeated. Our history has been defined by showing real, unmistakable proof that all people can attain Buddhahood, as our members everywhere work tirelessly to realize worldwide Kosen Rufu. Put another way, we are committed to caring for the person right in front of us and helping them revitalize their life. As wonderful, good friends or positive influences, we support all individuals in the drama of transforming their karma. Encouraging and fostering one person is the first step toward actualizing worldwide Kosen Rufu. Or rather, worldwide Kosen Rufu starts with one person becoming happy. Please rest assured, therefore, that the benefit you gain from fostering one individual is boundless and immeasurable. The personal experiences in faith that members share during discussion meetings are the clearly visible proof of the 21st century, messages of unsurpassed hope and for all humanity, demonstrating the supreme dignity of human beings. The examples, words, commitment, and conduct of SGI members, second column, page 47, of SGI members as they overcome life's sufferings and vibrantly contribute to society greatly inspire many people around the world to live their lives with courage and hope. The oneness of mentor and disciple and the oneness of life and death. At the meeting where I first met my mentor, Mr. Toda, this is President Keita talking again, I stood up and recited an impromptu poem expressing my gratitude. Traveler, where do you come from and where do you go? The moon is set and the sun has not yet risen. In the darkness before dawn, I advance in search of light. To dispel the dark clouds in my mind, to seek the great tree unbowed by the storm, I spring from the earth. I remember the wondrous feeling that filled my being as I returned home the night of my first encounter with Mr. Toda. Even after his death, my mentor remains alive in my heart. He happily accompanies me on the journey of Kosen Rufu, sometimes spurring me on like a stern father and sometimes warmly watching over me. Each step I took with Mr. Toda lives in my heart, shining as the most glorious memory of my present life in this human world. We, the members and disciples of Soka, through our shared struggle, have spread Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism of the Sun to 192 countries and territories around the globe. This is proof of the eternal victory of the oneness of mentor and disciple and the oneness of life and death. I have no regrets. And now, each step forward by the young successors who share my spirit in the new era of worldwide Kosen Rufu, is opening the way to the limitless future and creating an everlasting path for the compassionate propagation of the great law. Joined by infinitely profound karmic ties, we will be reborn together in our next lifetime and the next after that in the garden of the SGI and work together once more for Kosen Rufu. Together, again, he said the garden. Okay, what's in a garden? Everything, all kinds of stuff, even little wildflowers sometimes, okay? Even little things that weren't planted to be eaten. The garden is a place of wonderfulness, everything. He says, Geth declared, and how do you pronounce that guy's name? Gut. God, after 70 years, I know how to pronounce it. Okay, Gut declared, a person, which is again who he quoted as he began this lecture. All right, page 48. We're almost done. Gut declared, a person through faith and hearty courage will come off victor in the most difficult enterprises. How true that is. Let's have the spirit that the greater the challenges we face, the more we will hold our heads high and move forward with confidence, singing songs of Kosen Rufu joyfully together, striving on the forefront of the path of Kosen Rufu. Let's guide all our family members in the direction of happiness, and let's win in the end without fail. Let's advance in high spirits. Let's win cheerfully. There is no need to rush or be impatient. Just calmly do your best to fulfill your mission where you are right now. We can make the stage for our endeavors expand limitlessly. Mr. Toda said, when I die, I have to go to another planet somewhere in the universe and work for Kosen Rufu there. I leave the realization of Kosen Rufu here on earth to my disciples. The scale of Buddhism is grand and boundless. And by the way, I inserted two videos ago. I left you guys. Did you guys look at that thing on the universe that I put in? There's a link in 2 Go shows ago, I put it in as a comment. There's a link to a fabulous video on the vastness of what the James Webb telescope is understanding now. Really, the universe is so big, it's really, we all know it's infinite, and we know, but you should see that visually characterized for yourself. It's deeply profound, and it's actually all Buddhism. This guy's talking all science, and it's all Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's the only reason I put it in. It makes you aware of the fact that this is really the basis of everything. If you listen to all the science, then this is particle physics, man. Is the only thing close to it is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. I guess they're the same thing, right? So he says, there is no need to rush or be impatient. Just calmly do your best and fulfill your mission where you are right now. We can make the stage of our endeavors expand limitlessly. Mr. Toda said, when I die, I have to go to another planet somewhere in the universe and work for Kosen Rufu there. There are a lot of options as far as that is concerned. I leave the realization of Kosen Rufu here on earth to my disciples. The scale of Buddhism is grand and boundless. Those who have walked the path of the noble cause of Kosen Rufu to the very end, proud to be practitioners of the Lotus Sutra, will enjoy great benefit in lifetime after lifetime, and their descendants will continue to flourish in generation after generation. That's what I was talking about. The Daishonin is watching over us. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions are rejoicing in our efforts. As comrades sharing profound karmic bonds, let's advance boldly on the path of our vow for Kosen Rufu, a path leading to eternal triumph and prosperity. And I got, wow. Thank you.
Thank you.